Chapter 1: The Waiting Room. The air inside Dr. Ramirez's clinic felt too still, like the kind of quiet that comes after a hymn ends, but before anyone dares to clap. I sat near the window, my purse resting on my knees, fingers tapping the same slow rhythm they always did when I tried to look calm. It wasn't my first time in a waiting room. Lord knows, after 62 years you sit in plenty of them. But that morning, something about the silence made my stomach twist. A television mounted high on the wall played one of those morning talk shows where people smile too much, but the sound was turned down. Instead, there was only the faint squeak of shoes on linoleum and the scratch of pens filling out forms. I caught the scent of antiseptic and cheap coffee from the hallway, that sharp, bitter mix that somehow always says, "You're not home here." Across from me sat a young mother bouncing a baby on her knee, the child's laughter slicing through the heavy air like sunlight through blinds. 2 chairs away, an older man kept coughing softly into a handkerchief, eyes fixed on the floor as if staring might keep him from falling apart. Everyone had that same look, the kind of waiting that isn't about time, but about permission to breathe again. I tried to read the magazine on my lap. Southern Living, March issue, but the words swam entangled. Recipes for Easter cakes, photos of gardens, smiling families around dining tables. I turned a page and saw a recipe for lemon pound cake, the kind I used to bake for Marcus when he was a boy. I could almost smell it, butter, sugar, vanilla, but the memory curdled before it reached sweetness. I hadn't baked in years. I took a slow breath and pressed my palms together to stop the shaking. "You're fine," I whispered under my breath. "You're just tired. That's all." That was the lie I'd been living with for months, telling myself the dizziness was just hunger, the shortness of breath just age. Telling myself I didn't need to bother Dr. Ramirez with every little thing. Truth is, I've always been better at caring for other people than myself. 32 years as a school principal will train you that way. You learn to smile through pain, to straighten your back even when it's aching, to make calm look effortless. The front desk phone rang, and the nurse answered with a bright voice, that careful professional cheer they teach you in training. I watched her nod, then frowned slightly. She whispered something to another nurse. Their eyes flicked in my direction for just a second. That was all it took for the room to tilt. They didn't call my name right away, but I knew. You don't need to be told when something's wrong. Your body always knows before your mind does. I shifted in my seat, tucked my cardigan tighter. The clock above the door ticked so loud I could feel it in my bones. 10:42. The second hand kept swinging back and forth, taunting me with every click. Outside the window, I could see the street, wet from last night's rain. Cars passed by, ordinary lives continuing as if my world wasn't shrinking by the minute. A man walked his dog, a teenager rode past on a bicycle, a woman in a red coat waited for the bus. All of them heading somewhere. All of them certain of what came next. I'd woken that morning thinking it would be a quick visit, maybe a vitamin deficiency, a bit of high blood pressure, something fixable. I'd even put on lipstick, my old rose shade, the one that made me feel composed. I'd ironed my blouse, packed my reading glasses, and told myself I'd stop by the grocery store afterward. Chicken, green beans, maybe cornbread for dinner. Simple, predictable things. But the body has its own plans. I thought about last week at church, when I'd nearly fainted after the choir's last song. Angela had caught my arm just in time. "Clara, you need to stop pretending you're made of steel," she said. I'd laughed it off. "Steel doesn't rust easy." She'd rolled her eyes. "Maybe not, but even steel needs oiling." I'd brushed her off, like always. But now sitting there, I wished I'd listened. A door opened, click whoosh. Nurse Evelyn stepped out, scanning the room with that careful smile. She was a sweet woman, always remembered my birthday, always complimented my earrings. But that morning, her eyes looked different. Tired. Almost sorry. "Mrs. Jennings?" My name hung in the air like a note from a church organ. Full, slow, and heavy. I rose, trying to steady my knees. The magazine slid from my lap and hit the floor, pages fanning open. Evelyn bent to pick it up. "It's okay," I said quickly, too quickly. "Leave it." She didn't. She picked it up anyway, smoothing the pages like it mattered. Maybe it did. Sometimes the smallest kindness breaks you more than cruelty ever could. I followed her down the hallway. The soles of her shoes squeaked softly against the tile. And I tried to match her pace, not too fast, not too slow. My heart was thudding hard enough to feel in my ears. Dr. Ramirez will be right in, she said, leading me to the same pale blue room I'd been in dozens of times before. She gestured to the chair by the desk. You okay, Miss Clara? I'm fine, I lied again. My voice sounded steady enough, but I could feel the lie pulsing beneath it. She hesitated, then nodded and left, closing the door behind her. And just like that, I was alone, sitting in a room full of instruments that could tell the truth better than people ever could. The clock on the wall ticked. The paper sheet on the exam table rustled with the air conditioning. A chart hung nearby, human heart cross-section. Red and blue veins spreading like tangled roots. I looked at it too long and felt my chest tighten. My purse sat beside me. I reached inside and pulled out a photo, Marcus on his graduation day. 20 years old, cap slightly crooked, smile wide enough to light up the frame. I touched his face with my thumb, tracing the edge like prayer. We hadn't spoken properly in months. He always said he was busy. Work, family, life, the usual excuses. I didn't push. That's something mothers learn too late. Silence doesn't fix distance, it feeds it. The door creaked open, and Dr. Ramirez stepped in, his white coat freshly pressed, his eyes already weary. Clara, he said softly, not Mrs. Jennings this time, just Clara. That alone made my stomach drop. He closed the door behind him, took a slow breath, and for a moment didn't speak. That's when I knew whatever was coming next wasn't routine. I stared at the chart again, the one with the red and blue lines, and whispered under my breath, Lord, give me strength to hear it. Outside the door, the clock kept ticking. Inside, time had already stopped. The clock on the exam room wall didn't tick so much as accuse. Every jump of the second hand felt like a finger tapping my shoulder, asking, and what about now? And now? And now? I tried to sit still, knees together, purse strap across my lap like a seatbelt. But my pulse kept slipping out of its lane, racing ahead of me, then stalling, then racing again. I told myself to breathe. In for 4. Out for 6. Years of school assemblies and emergency drills had trained me to set a room's rhythm with my voice. But here the room set the rhythm, and it sounded like a metronome in someone else's hands. The air conditioning sighed. Paper rustled beneath me. Somewhere beyond the door a printer chattered itself awake, then hushed as if it, too, remembered where it was. The second hand hacked its way around the clock face. I watched it climb over the 12 and felt a memory rise with it. Tiny, inconvenient, bright as a dropped pin. 3 months ago. Grocery store on Jefferson. Tuesday afternoon. I'd put off shopping until the last minute, which meant the place was full of mamas snatching up dinner after work and teenagers drifting down the snack aisle like they were choosing futures instead of chips. I had bread, milk, collard greens, and a small bouquet of sunflowers I didn't need but wanted anyway. When I bent to grab a carton of eggs, the aisle tilted. Not the dramatic kind of tilting they show in movies, subtler, like a floorboard giving under the carpet. I gripped the cart and smiled at no one, the kind of smile we use to apologize for existing. Just stood up too fast. I told myself. You skipped lunch. That's all. I put the eggs in the cart and kept moving. By the time I reached the cereal, the world had steadied. I bought the sunflowers. At home, I cut their stems at an angle the way my mother taught me, slid them into a mason jar, and set them on the kitchen table. The petals were all the same yellow, but some looked tired at the edges, like a congregation after a long sermon. I didn't tell anyone about the tilt. What would I have said? The aisle leaned away from me, but I kept shopping. It sounded too small to be serious and too serious to be small. The second hand crept 9 white dashes. My mouth tasted like pennies. I remembered the mug. Wednesday mornings, I make coffee in the same blue ceramic I've had for 20 years. It has a chip on the rim that always finds my lip no matter how I turn the handle. That morning, I poured lifted, and without warning, my fingers gave out. Nothing dramatic, just a soft failure. The mug slipped, shattered on the tile, coffee racing between the cracks like it was late for an appointment. I stood there with the handle still in my hand. You've been holding everything for so long. I told myself. that even your hands forget they can put something down. I swept the pieces. The largest shard held the printed word hope, snapped clean through the O. I laughed, then cried, then laughed again because crying over broken ceramic felt like a luxury I couldn't afford. The second hand stabbed the two. The room smelled faintly of rubbing alcohol, and the oranges Nurse Evelyn keeps in a basket for children who don't want lollipops. Church, last month. The choir had just finished Order My Steps. I hadn't sung with them since Samuel died. The notes sat too high in my throat. But I still stand when they stand, clap when they clap, hold breath when Reverend James lowers his head. That morning, the lights were warmer than usual, or maybe the sanctuary had decided to hold its breath with us. I felt the heat gather at the back of my neck, then behind my eyes. The hymn ended. Applause began. The room puckered like fabric pulled too tight, and I had to reach out for the pew to keep from swaying. Angela, 3 seats away, was faster than gravity. She caught my elbow. "Mom," she whispered, that sound Black women use to hold back worry and scold you at the same time. "You eating? You sleeping? Don't lie." I said, "I'm fine." She squeezed my arm until I looked at her. Fine is not a feeling. After service, she pushed a bottle of water into my hand and stood watching me drink it like a nurse with a stopwatch. I promised her I'd make an appointment. That afternoon I almost did. I even typed Dr. Ramirez into my phone. Then I set it down and made cornbread instead, because recipes do not ask you to tell the truth. The second hand dragged itself over the 3. My lungs felt too small for the room and too big for my chest. I pressed 2 fingers to the side of my neck the way the nurse taught me years ago when my blood pressure ran high during a thunderstorm. The beat was strong but impatient. At the school, my last year before retiring, I used to tuck a granola bar into my blazer pocket before morning announcements, just in case I forgot to eat. The habit stayed long after the job was gone. Hunger had been a simple explanation for so many things. I wanted it to explain this, too. But even on days when I remembered breakfast, the world still leaned sometimes. And the light still brightened to a glare I had to squint through. Age, people say, with the soft shrug of those who hope time can be bargained with. Everybody slows down. But the slowing didn't feel natural. It felt like someone had thumbed the pause button and walked out of the room. The second hand lurched to the fore. 2 weeks ago I was in my hallway, readying my headscarf, when I lost my balance and brushed my shoulder against the picture frames. The crooked line made me angrier than the stumble. I straightened each frame with careful fingers, then stood back to see if the house approved. One photo snagged my attention. Marcus at 15, wearing a tie he hated and a smile that looked borrowed. That was the year Samuel still laughed with his whole body. The year my boy still told me the truth. I lifted the frame, felt my hand tremble, and set it back before the tremble became a shake. I texted Marcus that night. "How are you?" He replied the next day. "Busy but good." "You?" "Fine," I wrote. Then deleted the word and typed, "I miss you." No reply came. I turned off the lamp and lay there in the dark rehearsing a conversation I wouldn't have. The second hand passed the 5. It sounded louder when it was behind me than when I watched it. I turned away and looked at my purse instead, at the small protective rituals that make a life look controlled. Wallet zipped. Tissues folded. Church fan tucked inside with the worn face of Dr. King faded by summers of use. Lipstick cap twisted tight. Rosewood, same shade I wore the day I signed the retirement papers. You prepare for the moments you think will need props. You forget the moments that will strip you of them. I thought of the stairwell at the library. I take the steps 2 at a time when I'm feeling stubborn. 1 at a time when my knees remember what year it is. Last week, I reached the landing and had to stop. Not because I was winded but because something buzzy unfurled behind my ribs, a metal hum that reminded me of the fluorescent lights that used to rattle in the school's old wing. I waited for it to pass. It did. It always did. I told myself that meant I was safe. The second hand swung across the 6 like a scythe. I imagined it slicing minutes off my day and laying them side by side like tall grass. What would I do if I could pick the minutes up again? Which would I press between book pages and save? Maybe the one where Samuel danced me around our tiny kitchen to a Motown song we both knew every word to. The laugh in his voice louder than the radio. Maybe the one where I watched Marcus sleep, his forehead damp with baby sweat, and marveled at the audacity of a heart that beat outside my body. Maybe the one where I stood alone in the driveway the morning after Samuel's funeral, still in black, the world already behaving as if nothing had happened, and the sparrows on the telephone wire kept on talking like they had told jokes at the wake. If you could save time like that, there would be no waiting rooms. Only rooms of remembering. The second hand ticked past the 7. I thought about the night my legs felt too heavy to climb into bed and I sat on the edge, hands braced on the mattress, staring at my ankles as if they belonged to a stranger. I pressed a thumb into the skin and watched the dent hold the shape before it slowly returned. Water, I told myself. Too much salt. I cooked with more herbs the next week and less remorse. The dent came back anyway. I thought about the mornings I woke with my tongue dry and a chemical taste sitting on it like an insult I couldn't spit out. I blamed the new toothpaste. I blamed the weather. I blamed the city for not raining when it should and for raining when it shouldn't. As if the sky and I had made a bargain and it had reneged. I thought about the dreams. How lately they arrived bright, and then refused to develop, like Polaroids that stayed stubbornly gray. In one, Samuel's hands were warm in mine, but I couldn't see his face. In another, Marcus was calling to me from the top of a long school hallway, and every step I took doubled the distance between us. I woke from that one with my heart pounding the way the clock was pounding now. The second hand slid to the 8. Someone in the hallway laughed too loudly at something not funny. A cart rattled by and stopped. Paper tore. A door hissed shut. I remembered a morning at the mall, coming out of the shoe store with nothing in my hands because everything I tried on was too tight in exactly the wrong place. I sat on the bench and took off my flats and rubbed my feet the way my grandmother used to. Circles of small comfort on a map of sore places. A little girl walked by in light-up sneakers, her mother half dragging her as if joy were a thing that embarrassed her. The girl looked at me like she'd seen my future. I smiled so she would keep hers. Age, I told myself again. Age is a privilege. It is. It also has a way of insisting on itself. The second hand cleared the 9. In the corner of the room, a coat hook waited with open arms. I thought of all the coats it held in a year. Winter parkas, light cardigans, the jackets of men who sat erect and didn't fidget, and the shawls of women who pressed tissues to their eyes without smudging mascara. So many strangers steadying their weather against that one metal hand. I reached for my phone and forced myself not to search my symptoms like a scavenger hunt. I'd done that once years ago, and learned I was dying 17 different ways before lunchtime. I set the phone face down. The second hand clucked its approval at my restraint. Miss Clara. My own voice sounded as if I were calling myself from another room. I answered myself, and smiled at how foolish it felt. I closed my eyes, counted the tick-ticks, and let them carry me backward. Years ago, in my principal's office, a boy named Jermaine burst in with his fist closed so tight his knuckles looked polished. He wouldn't open it. Said nothing. Sat small in the chair like a dragon guarding a hoard. I dismissed the other students with a look. We sat in silence long enough for the clock to offend us both. Finally he opened his hand. A honeybee sat there, stunned but unbroken. He said, they were going to step on her. I fetched a paper cup, turned it upside down over the bee, slid an index card under it, and walked with him to the courtyard. Together, we lifted the cup. The bee tottered into flight, corrected itself, and chose the marigolds by the brick wall like they were an old address. Sometimes, I told Jermaine, things fall down before they figure out how to rise. We stood there until the bell rang, and I sent him back to class. The secretary later complained I'd been late to a meeting. I apologized and didn't explain. I remember thinking the apology was not for the meeting. The bee made it. I'm the one who never learned how to land. The second hand reached the 10. Footsteps. A shadow slipped under the door as if the hallway had leaned toward me. I pressed my palms against my knees and felt the fabric of my skirt. Smooth, then worn where years of sitting and standing had polished it faintly. Retirement had changed the pace of my days, but not the shape of me. I still defaulted to tidy. I thought about how I had put off this appointment 3 times. Once because of rain. Once because Marcus said he might call that evening and I didn't want to miss it. He didn't. Once because the house felt too quiet, and I decided to make it noisier with radio and cleaning, and the kind of busyness that looks like care but smells like fear. The body had been asking, and I had kept it on hold with smooth music. The second hand dared the 11. I accepted what I had not wanted to name. This wasn't lack of sleep or too much coffee or a tired season that could be walked out of like a bad mood. This was something that had a pattern, and the pattern had been drawing itself in dots for months while I kept pretending it was confetti. Okay, I whispered to the clock, to the room, to the frightened child under my ribcage who still wants adults to promise everything will be fine. Okay then. The second hand climbed one last notch. The doorknob turned. Nurse Evelyn came in first, her smile careful, generous, and not quite reaching her eyes. She held a folder the way you hold a sleeping bird, lightly, as if pressure itself were a kind of harm. Clara, she said softly, and the way she said my name told me the last word of this chapter would not be fine. Behind her, I heard Dr. Ramirez's coat whisper against the door. The clock kept going, as if time had appointments of its own, and we were simply late to them. Evelyn's smile stayed in place like a nightlight in a dark hallway. I braced my hands on my knees, the paper crinkled under me, and I lifted my eyes to meet hers. Ready? She asked. No. Yes. I nodded anyway. The second hand slipped past the 12. When Evelyn opened the door, the scent of her perfume reached me before her words did. Faint lavender, the kind older Southern women wear to church because it lingers longer than truth. Come on in, Miss Clara, she said, her smile soft but tight, like a ribbon stretched around something fragile. Her voice was syrup sweet, but her eyes, those gave it all away. She wasn't smiling with her heart. I followed her down the hallway, my shoes whispering against the floor. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, one of them flickering like it couldn't decide whether to live or die. Each step felt measured, like walking into a place that already knew my name before I said it. You doing all right today? Evelyn asked, glancing back, her tone casual but too quick. I suppose that depends on your definition of all right, I said. That made her lips twitch, just slightly. You always say something like that. Habit, I said. Old teachers never answer simple questions with simple words. We both chuckled, a small, nervous sound that died quickly in the sterile air. She led me into the small exam room, where everything looked too clean to be real. The chair sat waiting, paper cover smooth and untouched, like it hadn't yet met bad news. The instruments were arranged neatly, metal gleaming ready. Evelyn set the folder down on the counter and turned to face me. Dr. Ramirez will be in shortly. Her voice cracked slightly on shortly. It was the kind of crack only someone who listens for tone, a teacher, a mother, a widow, would notice. I nodded, pretending not to. She hesitated at the door. You need anything? Water? Tea? No, thank you. Okay, honey. She reached for the doorknob, but her hand stopped midair. For a moment, she looked like she might say something, a warning, maybe, or an apology, but then she smiled again, the same smile that didn't reach her eyes. I'll be right outside, she said. The door closed softly, like a secret. The room had a stillness that pressed against my ears. The walls were pale blue. Meant to calm you, I suppose, but they only reminded me of old hospital gowns and the sky you see through a window when you're too weak to go outside. I stared at the counter where Evelyn had left the folder. It was thick, too thick for a simple checkup. My name written neatly on the label. Jennings, Clara M., black ink. No middle names for comfort, no titles for respect. Just me flattened into paper. The clock above the sink ticked once, sharp, distinct, and I thought of all the seconds that had brought me here. I remembered the first time I met Evelyn. She was new at the clinic then, her hair a different color, her confidence smaller. I was there for a flu shot, complaining about how long the wait was. She'd said, "We all wait for something, don't we, Miss Clara?" And I'd liked her immediately. Now, she couldn't look me in the eye. Dr. Ramirez took longer than usual. That was never a good sign. Doctors only make you wait when they're rearranging words in their mouths, looking for a kind way to say something cruel. I kept my purse on my lap, one hand resting on it like I could guard myself from whatever was coming. My fingers brushed the worn edges of my Bible, the small one I carried since Samuel's funeral. It still smelled faintly of rose oil from the day Angela dabbed it on the pew to mask the scent of tears. The door opened, breaking the silence. "Morning, Clara," Dr. Ramirez said softly. He was still handsome in that weathered way men get when kindness starts to wear their edges down. His hair was silver now, his eyes darker than I remembered. He held a clipboard like it might bruise if he squeezed too hard. "Morning, doctor," I said, matching his calm. "How have you been feeling lately?" I smiled. "You mean since the last time I told you I was fine?" That earned the faintest laugh. "Something like that." He sat across from me, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. His eyes darted once to the folder on the counter, Evelyn's folder, then back to me. "What's wrong?" I asked, because the pretending felt insulting now. He exhaled, rubbing his forehead. "You've been with me a long time, Clara. Since before I had gray hair, and before you retired." "And you know I won't dance around what needs saying." I nodded, gripping my purse tighter. He reached for the folder and opened it slowly, like a priest turning to the page of a psalm he's recited too many times. "There are some irregularities in your recent blood work," he began. "A few values that concern me." I waited. "Your white cell count is higher than expected." That could mean a number of things, but he stopped, his voice thinning like paper. "But what?" He looked up then, and his eyes met mine, steady, sorrowful. "It's not just infection. There's something more systemic at play." The word systemic hit me like cold water. I hated that word. Too big, too vague, too final. He continued carefully. "There are markers. Ones we usually see when the body's producing cells that don't follow the normal rules." I felt my breath leave me in pieces. "You're talking about cancer." He didn't nod. He didn't have to. His silence said it for him. I stared at the floor tiles, small gray squares in perfect lines. My eyes traced them, corner to corner, as if there might be an escape hatch between them. "How bad?" I finally asked. He hesitated. "We need more tests before we know." "But Clara," he paused again. "It's advanced." The word sank like a stone dropped into deep water. No splash, just silence afterward. Advanced. Like I'd been living with it for years, teaching, laughing, praying, all the while something inside me growing without permission. I laughed softly, though it came out brittle. "Well," I said, "I always was ahead of my class." Dr. Ramirez's eyes softened. "Clara, don't you Clara me," I said gently. "If I don't laugh, I'll cry, and I'd rather not give you the satisfaction of seeing that." He smiled then, real sad human. "You don't have to be strong all the time." "I don't know how to be anything else." He leaned forward. "We'll schedule a biopsy to confirm. I'll have Evelyn call you with the details." At the sound of her name, I looked toward the door. Through the small glass window, I could see her silhouette, still standing outside, still waiting. Her head was bowed, hands clasped in front of her. Praying maybe. I wanted to tell her it was too late for prayer, but my throat refused to open. When I left the room, Evelyn was right there, eyes glossy like wet glass. "Miss Clara," she whispered. "You need a minute?" I shook my head. "If I sit down now, I might not get up." She nodded, stepping aside to let me pass, but reached out and touched my arm, gentle, firm. "You're not alone in this, you hear me?" I forced a small smile. "That's what people say when they know you are." Her lips parted, then closed again. For once, Evelyn didn't have words. I walked down the hallway, my steps slow but deliberate. The floor tiles gleamed beneath me, every reflection of light like a ghost of who I was 10 minutes ago. At the front desk, I stopped to sign the next appointment form. The pen shook in my hand. I forced my name onto the line, but it came out uneven, as if my body already knew it was losing control. "See you soon, Miss Clara," the receptionist said. "Maybe," I murmured. Outside, the sunlight looked too sharp, the air too clean. Cars passed, people laughed, a bus hissed at the curb. Everything went on. The world never waits for your news. I stood there for a moment, hand shielding my eyes. My shadow stretched long across the pavement, thin, almost transparent. I remembered Evelyn's smile, that fragile, trembling mask, and realized it wasn't pity I'd seen in her eyes. It was grief. She already knew what I was just beginning to understand. Sometimes, the worst part of bad news isn't hearing it. It's walking back into the same world that hasn't changed at all. Dr. Ramirez didn't speak right away. He closed the door behind him and let his hand rest on the knob as if the room might bolt if he took his palm away. Then he crossed to the counter, lifted the folder Evelyn had left, and held it flat against his chest like a book he wasn't ready to open in front of the class. "Clara," he said, and stopped there. My name hung between us like a coat on a single hook. There are silences that soothe, and silences that bruise. This one was the second kind. I could feel it blooming beneath my skin, a blue that had no business being there. He pulled the rolling stool a little closer, and sat so that his knees, not his desk, faced me. It was the posture of a man who had learned that bad news travels faster over furniture. "I want to do this carefully," he said. "And plainly." "Carefully and plainly," I repeated, nodding. "Like a fire drill." Omething like a smile tugged at his mouth. "Yes. Exactly like that." He opened the folder. Paper side. The edges were neat. Someone had aligned them with a ruler or a nervous thumb. He turned one sheet, then another, and still no words. "Doctor," I said softly, "if we're going to rip the bandage, let's not count to 3. He glanced up, guilt and affection crossing his face in the space of a blink. "All right." He tapped a page. "Your blood work, several markers, are not behaving. We're seeing cells in counts and patterns we don't expect to see." He looked at me as if to ask permission to keep going. I gave it with a breath. "I can't name a precise type today," he continued. "That would be guessing, and you deserve better than that. But the picture is consistent with a disease of the blood and bone marrow, something that makes the body forget its own rules." "Cancer," I said, finishing the sentence he owed me. The word felt heavy and round, like a stone I'd been making room for without realizing it. His eyes warmed with apology. "Yes." There was no thunder, no rushing in my ears, just the clock's modest tick. It sounded almost embarrassed to be working. "What stage?" I asked because television had taught me to ask it. The question felt like a prop I'd been issued for this scene. "With blood diseases," he said gently, "we talk less about stage tumors and more about how the marrow is functioning, how the cells are behaving, how organs are coping. We'll need to confirm what we're seeing with a bone marrow biopsy, and a few additional tests, flow cytometry, imaging. I don't want to skip steps. I don't want to frighten you with guesses." "I am already frightened," I said. "Honesty is less frightening than fog." He nodded once. "Understood." He turned another page. Lines of numbers marched in careful columns, black ants carrying news across a white field. I watched his finger trace a path I could not follow. "Your white count is high," he said. "And some of those white cells are immature. Think of it like a classroom full of students who were promoted without ever learning to read. They crowd out the ones doing the work." I let the metaphor sit. I knew those classrooms, had loved those children, had stayed late to teach them phonics while the janitor rattled his keys, and the sky outside pressed its dark face against the windows. "And that crowding," I said, "means the good kids can't do their jobs." "Exactly. How long?" I asked. "Has this been sitting in my bones making itself comfortable while I went about my business?" He didn't answer. Which was an answer. "I should have come sooner," I said, and hated the way the sentence tasted. Regret and salt. He leaned forward. "I won't let you do that to yourself. Bodies tell the truth slowly sometimes, and sometimes so quietly you can't hear it over the rest of life. Coming now is still coming." I looked past him to the anatomy chart. Heart in cross-section, blue and red rivers doing their patient work. "Samuel died 8 years ago," I said, surprising myself with the need to say his name to someone in a white coat. I learned to live around that hole. I thought the dizziness was grief doing its old tricks. It likes to disguise itself. "It does," he said. "But this part isn't grief. It's biology. And it's ours to measure and treat." I felt my jaw set the way it used to when a parent walked into my office insisting their child couldn't possibly be the one who started the fight. "What does treatment look like?" "We arrange the biopsy. We confirm what this is. Depending on that, we'll talk about medicines that ask the bad cells to leave the room. Some are pills, some are infusions. We manage side effects, we watch your numbers like hawks. We keep you safe while we teach your body new rules. Is it survivable? I asked, hating the smallness of my voice. Many people live with blood cancers for a long time, he said carefully. Not every diagnosis is a sentence with a period at the end. Some are commas. Some are semicolons. I won't lie and say this is easy, but I will say it is not hopeless. A semicolon. I pictured it, small, stubborn, holding two thoughts together that didn't want to be neighbors. He turned another page, then looked again at me as if remembering I was the most important thing in the room, not the paper. Do you have someone you'd like me to call? To be with you today? Angela's face rose in my mind, her hands, her firm way of insisting I drink water and tell the whole truth. Marcus's face rose too, but it was hazier, like a photograph taken in poor light. No, I said. Not yet. I need to let the words sit in my mouth before I put them in anyone else's. That makes sense. He slid a single sheet from the stack and set it on the desk between us. This explains the biopsy, what to expect, where we'll do it, how long it takes. We use local anesthesia. It's uncomfortable but quick. Evelyn will walk you through scheduling before you leave. Will I be able to drive myself? The practical questions came like hail, small and hard, skipping across the surface. Yes. And if you don't feel up to it, we can arrange a car. He pinched the bridge of his nose, then lowered his hand as if remembering he belonged to me for these minutes, not to his own worry. Clara, I want you to hear me say this. You are still you. This diagnosis is information, not identity. It will occupy time. It doesn't get to own your name. I swallowed. My name has been doing heavy lifting a long time, doctor. I know. He closed the folder. The room exhaled. We sat like that for a while, two people listening to a clock argue with a life. I thought of all the times I'd told children that the test did not define them, that scores were mirrors you could wipe clean and approach again. I wondered what it would mean to believe that now that the test was etched inside my bones. Any questions? He asked. 1,000, all wearing the same coat. Will my hair fall out? Will I stop recognizing my own hands? How much time? I chose none of them. I chose the smallest one because it was the one I could carry out of the room without dropping. Will it hurt? I asked. He didn't laugh at the simplicity. Yes, some things will. We will blunt what we can. You will name what you feel. I won't underestimate you. I nodded, and something unclenched between my ribs. Being underestimated hurts more than needles. He stood. I'll bring Evelyn in. At the door he paused, his hand on the knob the way it had been when he entered. Clara. Yes. Bring your faith with you, he said. Whatever shape it takes. I've seen it steady more than numbers. Faith and paperwork, I said. Quite a pair. History's favorite, he said, with the ghost of a smile. He left. The door whispered shut, and the room remembered itself. I stared at the paper he'd left. A rectangle of instructions that looked too white to be speaking of blood. I reached for my purse, found the little Bible by touch, not sight, and let it sit unopened in my palm. I did not pray. Not yet. I let the book warm under my skin until the shaking in my fingers shifted from panic to purpose. Through the window slit, I could see the hallway. Evelyn was there, not moving, her back against the wall. Eyes closed as if she were learning my news by osmosis. She opened them and saw me looking. That almost smile again, brave and not enough. She came in with a clipboard and two kinds of kindness. One for my body. One for the person who carried it. All right, Miss Clara, she said softly. We're going to schedule that biopsy. We've got next Tuesday at 10, or Wednesday at 2. Which one suits your life better? The question startled me with its generosity. Your life. As if I still had one I could choose the shape of. Tuesday, I said. Mornings are kinder. Tuesday it is. Her pen moved, sturdy and sure. Any allergies? Only to pretending, I said, and watched her snort before she hid it behind a cough. She explained the small things. The Band-Aid, the soreness, the ride home if I changed my mind about my own steering wheel. I nodded, yes, okay, as if collecting beads on a string. Toward the end, she hesitated. Doctor mentioned you might want someone with you. Her voice gentled to a whisper. I can go sit with you myself, but Angela would have my hide if I didn't call her. You and Angela, I said, shaking my head. A woman can't even get bad news in peace. We don't let you have good news alone either, she said. That's the point. She tucked the instruction sheet into a slim envelope and wrote my name on the front in her looping hand, Clara M. Jennings. The M looked like a wave cresting. She held the envelope a second longer than necessary before passing it to me, as if it might bite. Thank you, I said. She hovered. Do you want to sit a minute before you go? If I sit, I'll plant roots, I said. I think I need to move. Then we'll walk you out. Evelyn, I said, stopping her halfway to the door. Your perfume smells like lavender. She blinked. Yes, ma'am. My grandmother used to tuck lavender between sheets in summer, I said. Said it kept the bad dreams from crawling in. I'll bring you a sachet, she said, suddenly fierce. You hear me? A big one. That made me laugh, and the laugh startled us both. We stepped into the hallway. Dr. Ramirez stood at the nurse's station pretending to read something. He looked up, and his eyes did that warm thing again, the one that said I will carry my part of this. I nodded once to tell him I had understood. At the desk, the receptionist printed a small square of paper with the kind of font they use when they want to look friendly. It had Tuesday's date. 10 o'clock. The address of a suite 2 floors down where people learned the precise shape of their futures. I slid the appointment card behind the envelope with my name on it. The weight in my purse felt wrong, too light for what it meant. Outside, the day had the blunt brightness of early afternoon. The world pretended ignorance well. Cars eased past. A deliverman wrestled a dolly stacked with boxes of paper towels into the pharmacy next door. A teenager laughed into her phone and did not lower her voice out of respect for the newly diagnosed. I stood just beyond the overhang and let the sun find my face. It felt like a hand that didn't know whether to comfort or interrogate. On the walk to my car, my legs wobbled once, the way they had in the grocery aisle with the eggs. I rested my palm against the cool fender of a stranger's sedan until the ground remembered me. Then I kept going. In the driver's seat, I did not start the engine. I opened the envelope instead and took out the paper. I didn't read it yet. I simply looked at the inch of white, the clean margin where numbers and instructions would soon lay claim. I thought of margins and how teachers insist on them so the page can breathe, so the ideas don't tumble off the edge. I set the paper back, closed the envelope, put both in the glove compartment as if the car could carry the news a while, so my body didn't have to. My hands went to the steering wheel out of habit, 10 and 2. The way the first instructor had taught me when I was a girl with a license that felt like wings. Carefully and plainly, I said to the empty car. We'll do this carefully and plainly. The engine turned over. The radio came on too loud, hot with an advertisement, and I hit the button to hush it. I pulled into traffic with the cautious decisiveness of a woman who has shepherded children across too many parking lots to be reckless with her own bones now. At the first red light, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. My lipstick was still tidy. My eyes were not. The light changed. I drove. On the seat beside me, the envelope shifted with the curve of the road, a white fish riding a small current. I didn't touch it. Not yet. I would read those words, let them notch themselves into my day. In the kitchen where the sunflowers used to stand, I would stand up while I read, because sitting felt too much like surrender. Then I would call Angela. And later, when the dark deepened, I would try Marcus and leave a message he might not return. For now, I counted the breaths between the doctor's pause and my next right turn. For now, I allowed the clock to keep its own counsel while I kept mine. When I got home that afternoon, the envelope sat on the passenger seat beside me like an unwanted guest who refused to leave. I parked in the driveway, turned off the engine, and just stared at it. The sunlight through the windshield turned the white paper into something blinding, too bright to look at, too heavy to touch. For a long time, I didn't move. Cars passed, neighbors' sprinklers hissed, and somewhere down the block a child laughed, a small, piercing sound that didn't belong to my world anymore. When I finally reached for the envelope, my fingers trembled so hard I almost dropped it. The paper made a soft sound, a whisper really, when I slid it out. That was when the silence changed. It wasn't quiet anymore. It was thick. I unfolded the sheet. The words printed neatly in black ink. The clinic's logo in blue at the top. I read the first line 3 times before it made sense. Preliminary findings suggest evidence of abnormal cell growth consistent with hematologic malignancy. I stopped at malignancy. The word looked too clinical to mean death, too polite to mean disaster, but that's exactly what it meant. I read on. There were more words, about myeloid differentiation, abnormal proliferation, further evaluation. Scientific poetry written by someone who would go home tonight and eat dinner without thinking of me at all. By the second paragraph, my ears had started ringing. By the third, I couldn't hear the world at all. The house was too still when I walked in. The air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner from yesterday's half-hearted attempt at order. The clock on the wall ticked, but the sound seemed far away, like it belonged to another house entirely. I dropped my keys into the bowl by the door. The same blue ceramic bowl Samuel and I had bought at a craft fair 30 years ago. It made a hollow clink. I stood there for a long moment, hands still resting on the keys, before I whispered, "Well, here we are." The kitchen table was clean except for a vase of wilting flowers, leftovers from last week's grocery trip, their stems bent like tired arms, petals already curling inward. I set the paper down beside them. The medical word stared back at me, unmoving, unfeeling. The first time I ever held paper that changed my life, it had been Marcus's birth certificate. The second, Samuel's death notice. Now this. The circle didn't feel poetic, just cruel. I made tea without thinking. The kettle screamed, but I didn't flinch. The sound didn't register as something meant for me. I poured, stirred, added honey, watched it dissolve. Routine saves us when sense does not. The cup steamed quietly beside the paper as if offering comfort. I wrapped my hands around it, felt the warmth seep into my palms, but nothing reached deeper. My body was a house where all the lights had gone out. I looked at the words again, possible leukemia, and said them out loud just to see if they'd sound real. Possible leukemia. My voice cracked on possible. I'd spent my whole life speaking calmly, assemblies, parent meetings, graduations. I could soothe 100 restless teenagers with a single phrase. But there, in my kitchen, I couldn't control a single syllable. At some point, I must have walked to the window, because I found myself staring at the backyard. The wind moved through the azaleas Samuel planted years ago. I used to tease him for how carefully he trimmed them. Said he treated those bushes better than me. He'd grin and say, "You don't need trimming, Clara. You're already perfect." He'd said that 1,000 times. I'd believed it once or twice. Now, watching the wind push those same bushes, I felt a strange ache, not grief exactly, but absence reshaped into something sharper. Samuel had been gone 8 years, but suddenly his death felt brand new. What would you tell me now? I asked the window. Would you tell me to pray? To fight? To surrender? The air didn't answer. It just kept moving. When the phone rang, I nearly jumped. It was Angela. Of course it was Angela. "Clara, you home yet?" "Yes." "You sound off. You okay?" "Fine," I said automatically. "Fine," she repeated, voice dripping with disbelief. "You know that's my least favorite word." I smiled weakly. "Then stop asking questions you already know the answers to." She sighed. "What did the doctor say?" I stared at the paper, the black letters on white, the words that looked like they'd been written by someone who'd never heard a gospel song in their life. "There's something in my blood," I said quietly. A pause. "What kind of something?" "The kind that shouldn't be there." Her breath caught. "Oh Lord. Don't," I whispered. "Not yet." We stayed silent for a while. I could hear her breathing, steady, determined. That's how she's always been. When everyone else panics, Angela breathes for them. "You're not alone in this," she said finally. "I know. You don't sound like you do." I didn't. Because right then, I wasn't sure if anyone could reach me where I was, inside that quiet, numb fog between knowing and feeling. After we hung up, I picked the paper up again. It had started to curl slightly at the edges from my hands. I smoothed it flat against the table, as if that could smooth the chaos in my chest. I noticed a line I hadn't seen before. "Please bring a family member or friend to your next appointment for support." That sentence broke me. Not the diagnosis, not the words malignant or abnormal. That one. Because whoever wrote it assumed there was someone. Someone to come, to sit beside you, to hold your coat, to drive you home. And the truth was, there wasn't. Marcus was 3 states away, living a life that didn't have room for his mother's fragility. Angela was loyal but busy. The church meant well but love through casseroles and polite prayers, not long nights in silence. I pressed my thumb against the line until the paper dented. Family member or friend. I whispered. That's cute. The hours that followed passed strangely. The house looked the same, but every object seemed to watch me. The framed photos on the wall, Marcus as a baby, Samuel holding him high above his head, seemed to exist in another dimension. I walked into the living room, sat on the couch, and stared at the TV remote on the coffee table. I didn't turn it on. The noise would have felt like an insult. Instead, I just sat there, one hand still holding that piece of paper like it might dissolve if I let go. The sound that replaced everything else wasn't the clock or the wind or the cars. It was the faint, rhythmic pulse of my own heartbeat. Slow. Reluctant. Still there. I remembered something Samuel once said during his last hospital stay. I'd asked him if he was scared. He smiled, that calm, steady smile of his, and said, "No. I'm just curious what comes next." Curiosity. What a strange, beautiful word to bring into death. Now it echoed in my mind like a dare. By evening, the tea had gone cold. The paper sat in the same spot. I hadn't moved much. My reflection in the window looked ghostly, the soft curve of my shoulders, my hair pulled back, my eyes hollow but alert. I took the paper again, folded it carefully, and slid it into the drawer where I kept Samuel's letters. They were all written in his careful handwriting, blue ink neat, with the old habit of signing every one. "Forever yours, Sam." I placed the medical paper on top of them and whispered, "Forever mine too." Then I closed the drawer. For a moment, I stood there, breathing in the quiet. The numbness was still there, but beneath it, something small and alive started to stir, like the first flicker of light before dawn. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time since walking out of that clinic, I felt something like decision forming inside me. If my blood had turned against me, I would still claim the rest of me. The mind, the spirit, the faith, the stubborn heart that had carried me through every kind of storm. I ran my fingers once more over the smooth edge of the drawer. "All right then," I said softly. Outside, the crickets had begun their chorus, indifferent and eternal. I turned off the lights, leaving only the kitchen lamp glowing, a single square of warmth against the dark. And as I climbed the stairs, I realized the ringing in my ears had stopped. Silence had changed again. It wasn't empty anymore. It was waiting. The phone rang just after dusk, when the sky was the color of a bruise learning to fade. I had left the kitchen lamp on, a small, square halo in a house that suddenly felt like a cathedral empty between services. The paper from the clinic slept where I'd tucked it, in the drawer with Samuel's letters. I wasn't ready to open that drawer again, not yet. I was stirring a pot of grits. I didn't want when the sound cut through the quiet. Unknown number. Local exchange. I let it ring twice, 3 times, as if courage could be baked by delay. Then I answered. "Ms. Clara Jennings?" "Yes." "This is Janelle calling from the hospital laboratory. Do you have a minute to confirm a few details?" My knuckles tightened around the wooden spoon. "I suppose that depends on the details." A soft smile lived in her voice. "Not medical advice, just housekeeping. We ran your panel again today to prep the specimens for additional testing. And there's a small administrative discrepancy in your file we'd like to clear up before anything else proceeds." Discrepancy, I repeated, already tired of words that dress bad news in clean clothes. What did the computer trip over? "I'm seeing 2 blood types on historical documents." Papers rustled on her end of the call. "Your current type reads O positive. But an older entry in the Health Information Exchange, looks like it came from an outside clinic many years back, lists a positive. It's probably a charting error from another Clara Jennings in the system, but we need to re-verify yours and correct the record so cross-matching won't flag later. Have you ever had a transfusion? Bone marrow transplant? Anything that would change typing?" I leaned the spoon in the pot and turned off the flame. The burner ticked as it cooled. "No to all of that. I've bled and healed the regular way. Okay, she said, still gentle. Then this is likely just misfiled history. Happens more than we like. We'll need you to bring a photo ID next time, and we'll redraw a small tube. Type in screen, confirm O+. It's quick. We have you on the schedule for Tuesday morning, biopsy check-in, so we can do it then. I sank into the nearest chair, the one by the window where, on easier afternoons, I read grocery circulars like short stories. Oh, positive, I said, trying the sound on my tongue. I've always thought of myself as O. I don't know why, some school drive in the 80s maybe. I wrote it on a wallet card once. But A+, that must be someone else. Probably, Janelle repeated. But because both entries show your name and date of birth. Well, close enough. The system wants a human to bless the truth. Close enough, I murmured. That's how we all get in trouble. She hesitated. One more thing. This older entry includes an emergency contact with a different last name for your son, Marcus Harper. Our file lists Marcus Jennings. Do you know a Harper? I turned my head toward the hallway, as if a different answer might be hanging there among the picture frames. Angela Harper is my next-door neighbor and oldest friend. Marcus is my son. Jennings. Got it, she said quickly, as if tidying an index card. It's likely a merge. We'll bring everything into alignment on Tuesday. We traded the small paperwork prayers. Bring ID, arrive early, don't eat after midnight if anesthesia was likely it wasn't. And she thanked me for my time in the careful voice of people who spend their days stepping lightly through other people's thresholds. After she hung up, I stood in the cooling quiet, one palm flat against the table as if the house and I needed to steady each other. Oh, positive. A positive. Harper. Jennings. It should have been nothing, a clerical hiccup and annoyance. But the word scratched at a door I hadn't known was there. I found myself walking down the hall before I'd decided to, pulling the string for the attic stairs, climbing carefully, one hand on the rail, into the dust-lit triangle where forgotten things go to learn patience. There is a box up there with our names on it, the kind of box a life builds from papers other people told you to keep. I dragged it forward with my foot, knelt and opened it. The smell rose first. Old glue, old ink, summer heat stored like a secret. Birth certificates. Tax returns. A rubber-banded stack of immunization cards. Samuel's union book, its edges softened by years in his back pocket. A hospital bracelet from my appendix surgery when Marcus was 7. I rubbed my thumb across the plastic until the letters surrendered. Jennings, Clara M. DOB 08/17, and there, A+ in faded purple beside a barcode. I frowned at it the way you frown at a stranger who waves like family. On a yellowed card from a community blood drive in '93, my scribble. O+, next to a sticker that said thank you for donating. I remembered the nurse that day. How she told me my blood was common and precious both. How I had gone home feeling useful in a way that outlived the cookie they pressed into my hand. I placed the bracelet beside the card like children told to share a bench and behave. What are you two going to teach me? I asked the attic air. It did not answer, busy as it was with holding the roof up. Back downstairs, I spread the artifacts on the kitchen table and added today's envelope to their company. The past and the present sat together like cousins who had argued at a funeral. I called the clinic. Evelyn answered on the second ring. Tell me you are sitting down, she said, skipping hello the way only women who love you are allowed to do. I am. I lied, because stubbornness is a chair that follows you around. They called you. They did. A small thing. 2 blood types fighting in one file. Not fighting, she corrected automatically, then smiled in her voice. Just fussing. Computers do that. I found an old hospital bracelet that says A+, and a card that says O+. I've been 2 women and no one noticed. Evelyn breathed out. The exchange pulls in any clinic that ever touched your name. We fix it. The lab will redraw. I'll put a note on your chart myself. O+. We'll ask Janelle to merge the outside record under review, and not to share it to the care team until it's corrected. Janelle, I repeated. She sounds young. She is, Evelyn said, affectionate. Smart as a whip. And she likes to do things right. That's a dangerous combination. Silence braided itself between us. Finally she asked, "How's your spirit?" "I've been better and I will be worse," I said. "Today I'm between." "That's a real place," she said. "Don't let anyone rush you out of it." After we hung up, the house resumed its small talking. Pipes settling, refrigerator sighing, the collards outside gossiping with the wind. I rinsed the grits, set them aside, and poured myself water instead. It tasted like metal and mercy. The phone chimed again. A text from Angela. "Lamp on?" I'm walking over. I didn't answer. I just turned the porch light on and unlocked the door, because some kinds of love should never be made to knock. She came in with the night itself around her shoulders, sat at my table, and put her hands palm up on the wood like an altar waiting for offerings. "What happened?" "Lab found a small error," I said. "Or a small truth," I added, surprising both of us. I showed her the bracelet, showed her the card, told her about Harper and Jennings fighting inside a computer that didn't know us from anyone. She narrowed her eyes the way she does when a sermon leans too far on metaphor and not enough on meat. "You ever go to an A+ clinic?" "OB once, when I was pregnant with Marcus. Different practice for a while because work hours were impossible. But I don't remember blood type being the headline." "And the blood drive?" "At the school. They parked the bus out back and gave us those little cups of juice. I spelled my name neat for the sticker like a child trying to impress her teacher." Angela tapped the table 3 slow beats. "Hospitals get names wrong. Systems merge wrong. People get filed like socks. Don't borrow trouble, Clara." "I'm not borrowing it," I said softer than I meant. It walked in and sat down. She reached for the bracelet, turned it over. Could have been a clerk who typed A instead of O and never looked back. Could have been a nurse borrowing a barcode for training and forgetting to undo it. You know what this sounds like? What? Clerical sin. The kind God forgives and computers refuse to. That made me laugh once. A dry, surprised sound that startled the quiet and then relaxed it. We ate crackers with nothing on them, because sometimes salt alone is prayer, and Angela stayed until my shoulders loosened enough to belong to my body again. When she left, she kissed my cheek and said, "Bring your ID Tuesday. Bring that little Bible. Bring your whole name." After she'd gone, I washed the 2 cups and set them on the rack. In the window, my reflection hovered over the black outside like a ghost performing housework. I didn't recognize the set of my mouth just then. It looked like my mother's when she was done arguing with the day. I dried my hands and turned back to the table. The artifacts waited, patient. I flipped the blood drive card over. In my own handwriting. How like me to label even what didn't need it, I had scrawled. O+, common generous. I touched the words lightly, as if their ink might smudge into something newer. Behind the bracelet lay a thin envelope I didn't remember stealing from the attic box. Riverton Women's Clinic in blue, date blurred. I slid a finger under its flap and eased out a single sheet. A prenatal screen summary from a lifetime ago. At the bottom, a faint stamp, A+. My breath snagged. "Clerical sin," I said again. Or a chorus. I stood very still and let the feeling come. Not panic, something narrower. A line being drawn between 2 dots I hadn't realized lived on the same page. I thought of Marcus, of the checkmark beside father's name I'd written in that same clinic, of Samuel laughing when the nurse asked if he wanted to cut the cord, of how his hands shook and he said, "I better not, I'll make a mess," and how the nurse said, "Oh honey, that's what we do here." On impulse, I took down the family file again and thumbed to Marcus's birth certificate. Mother's blood type, blank. Infant's blood type, blank. Some county clerk had skipped those boxes in 1985 and gone to lunch. I put everything back with the careful slowness of someone returning borrowed books to a stern librarian, wiped the table as if crumbs of old paper could stain the wood, and sat with my forearms resting on the edge. A+, O+, Harper, Jennings. Misfiled identity, misfiled blood. Numbness had carried me through the afternoon. A clean cotton wrapping around the part of me that was bleeding. The lab's small discrepancy had slipped a finger under the bandage. Not tearing, lifting. Letting air in. Air can sting before it heals. The phone vibrated one more time. A voicemail, no ring. Marcus's number. I hadn't heard his voice in weeks. I pressed play with a thumb that didn't feel entirely mine. Hey ma. It's late, I know. Been meaning to call. Work's been well. He cleared his throat. Listen. I'm gonna be in town this weekend. Grace too. I've got some things I need to talk to you about. And I want to be there for your appointment. The word faltered, landed crooked. Anyway, I'll text you the time. Love you. I replayed it twice because disbelief is deaf. He was coming. The son who had turned the volume down on his life with me, until I could barely hear it, was walking toward my door. And he had some things I needed to hear. I cupped the phone in both hands, as if warmth could pass through plastic. A small part of me wanted to lock the door and rehearse calm. A larger part wanted to be barefoot in the kitchen the way I had been the night he was born, to hold onto the counter and breathe and say, "Come on then, child. Tell me the thing you're afraid to say." I gathered the papers into their envelope, slid the hospital bracelet in with them, and wrote on the front in pen that didn't hesitate. Bring on Tuesday. Before bed, I stood at the sink and drank water until my body remembered it had a throat. The window held the night steady, so I didn't have to. When I finally lay down, the sheets were cool, and the spot where Samuel's shoulder had lived for 30 years was, as always, too big and too small at once. I did not pray exactly. I made a list in my head, which is my way of praying when the words won't sit still. Tuesday, ID envelope lipstick. Courage. Call Angela in the morning, tell her about Marcus's message. Ask the lab to print a corrected card with O+. Ask Dr. Ramirez if small errors ever mean big questions. Don't borrow trouble. But don't return any that's addressed to you either. Outside, a siren stitched itself through town and faded. The refrigerator hummed. The house exhaled. Somewhere, a neighbor's wind chime negotiated with the air. I let my eyes close and pictured a line between O+ and A+, between Harper and Jennings, between what the body knows and what the paperwork believes. It is a strange mercy when the first crack in the wall is small enough to ignore. It is a greater mercy when you don't. Morning would come. The envelope would ride shotgun again. And before the week was done, my son would sit at my table, and we would decide whether our names still recognized each other. For the first time since the diagnosis, sleep found me not like a thief but like an usher. One palm open, guiding me down the aisle to a seat with my name on it. The lamp in the kitchen kept its little square of light, as if guarding the papers I had given it. The call I hadn't expected kept echoing, but softer now, like a bell you hear after you've already decided to stand. Saturday came heavy and slow. Rain had whispered through the night, and now the yard looked like it had been freshly baptized, shining, still, and uncertain what to do next. I had been up since 5, cleaning things that didn't need cleaning. The same corner of the kitchen counter. The same framed photo of Samuel and me at the fair. Him holding a corn dog like it was fine cuisine, me laughing with my head thrown back. Every time I wiped it, I told myself, maybe this is the last time I'll see that smile before he's gone for good. It was foolish, but grief makes its own rituals. Marcus was coming. After months of silence, unanswered texts, and polite, "I'll call you soon" lies, my son was walking into my house again. The last time I saw him, it had been Christmas. He'd stayed 2 hours, checked his phone every 10 minutes, and left a casserole untouched on the table. I remembered the hug, polite, not warm, the kind people give before boarding a plane. I'd stood by the window and watched his taillights disappear into the night, promising myself I wouldn't cry. Of course I had. Now 8 months later he was coming to talk. I brewed coffee and tried not to think about what that meant. At 11:10, the sound of tires on gravel broke the quiet. I moved to the window. His car, newer than the last time, silver, spotless. Grace was in the passenger seat, her head turned toward him. They sat there longer than necessary, talking, or maybe preparing for battle. When they finally stepped out, my breath caught. Marcus looked older. Not by years, by something heavier. His eyes had that faint dullness of someone who hadn't slept right in weeks. His suit jacket hung a little loose, his shoulders drawn inward. Guilt changes posture before it changes words. Grace looked the same, neat, kind, careful. She carried a pie covered in foil, because women like her always do. A peace offering for sins yet unnamed. I opened the door before they could knock. "You remembered where I live," I said. Marcus smiled faintly. You haven't moved, Ma. Not yet. Grace stepped forward and hugged me, soft but sincere. It's good to see you, Mrs. Jennings. Clara, I corrected gently. You've earned that by now. She smiled, but her eyes darted toward Marcus like she was waiting for him to start something, or stop something. We sat in the living room. The air smelled faintly of lemon polish and nerves. Marcus didn't take off his coat. He never did when he was uncomfortable. I poured coffee for all of us, black for him, milk for her, same as always, and set the sugar bowl between us. He stirred without tasting, the spoon clinking like a metronome marking time for a confession. So I said, "What brings you two here? Other than baked goods?" Grace's hands tightened around her cup. "We wanted to see how you're doing," she said quickly. "I'm alive," I said. "For now." Her eyes flicked to Marcus. He cleared his throat. "Evelyn told me about the test results," he said quietly. I blinked. "Evelyn?" "The nurse. She called to confirm the appointment for Tuesday. I answered because you weren't picking up at the time, and she told you." I finished for him. He nodded, guilt blooming in his cheeks. I asked. She hesitated, but I could tell something was wrong. She didn't say much, but enough. "I see." The silence that followed wasn't angry. It was worse, disappointed. "Ma," he said finally. "Why didn't you call me?" "Because, Marcus, you don't answer when I do." He flinched like the words had weight. "That's fair," he admitted. "No," I said. "It's not fair. It's true. There's a difference." Grace looked down at her lap. Marcus leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I know I've been distant," he said. "Work, travel, excuses. I didn't mean for it to be like this." "Things don't mean," I said softly. "People do." He nodded again, slower this time. "You always did talk like a teacher." "I spent 30 years teaching other people's children how to tell the truth," I said. "Turns out it's harder when it's your own." We sat there for a moment, the clock ticking between us. Then Grace reached for her purse, as if that might anchor her. "There's something else," she said quietly. Marcus looked at her sharply, but she pressed on. "We got some blood work done last month. Routine things. Our doctor mentioned something unusual in Marcus's file, something about genetic markers, ancestry mix-ups. He said it wasn't harmful, just confusing." I frowned. "Confusing how?" Marcus took a deep breath. He said there was a mismatch between what I told him my background was and what my DNA showed. Something about blood group compatibility. He said sometimes that kind of thing can happen if... He stopped, his eyes flicking away. "If what?" I pressed. He looked down, voice barely audible. "If there's an error in parentage records." The words dropped like stones in the air. For a second, I didn't understand them. Then I did. "You think I lied about your father?" I said flatly. No, I. That's what that means. Parentage records. You think Samuel Jennings might not be your father?" Grace reached for my hand. "He's not saying that, Clara. We're just..." I pulled my hand back. "Oh, he's saying it. He just doesn't have the courage to use plain words." Marcus's jaw tightened. "It's not about courage. It's about confusion. About facts. There's a difference." "Facts," I repeated. "You sound just like your father when he was trying to prove something he already knew was wrong." "Mom, don't you mom me. You've been gone for months. You didn't call when I fainted at church. You didn't come when I had pneumonia. And now you drive up here to tell me I'm a liar?" Grace started to speak, but I lifted a hand. "No. Let him talk." Marcus looked at me, really looked, for the first time in years. His eyes were dark, tired, and full of something that hurt to see, shame. "I don't want to believe it," he said. "But the doctor said my markers don't align with Dad's. He said if I ever needed a donor, I'd have trouble matching him or his side of the family. I thought it was a lab mistake. But then..." He stopped again. "But then you found out my blood type doesn't match either," I said quietly. His silence was confirmation. The rain started again, slow at first, then steadier. The sound filled the room, soft but relentless, like a metronome that wouldn't stop until someone learned their line. I stood up, walked to the window, and stared out. My reflection hovered there, calm, upright, unrecognizable. When I spoke, my voice surprised even me. It was steady. Marcus, your father loved you from the moment you existed. That's a fact that no test can rewrite. And I have never lied about who I am. But if you came here to ask me if I ever made a mistake, I turned back toward him. You'll have to decide what kind of answer you want. Truth or comfort? He stood too. I just want to understand. Understanding is expensive, I said. You sure you can afford it? Grace's eyes shone with unshed tears. Clara, please. This isn't about blame. No, I said. It's about blood. And I'm suddenly realizing that blood isn't as simple as everyone thinks. Marcus exhaled, ran a hand through his hair, and looked like a boy again. The same boy who used to come to me crying when the world confused him. I wanted to reach for him, but the distance between us had too many ghosts sitting in it. Finally, he said, Tuesday. I'll go with you. To the hospital. I shook my head. You don't have to. I want to. I searched his face. The guilt was still there, but something else had joined it. Resolve, maybe, or fear trying to disguise itself as love. All right, I said. Tuesday then. He nodded. Tuesday. Grace placed the untouched pie on the counter before they left. We'll call tomorrow, she said. When the door closed, the silence folded itself around me like a coat too heavy for spring. I looked at the pie, perfect, untouched, sweet, and felt tears come for the first time in days. Because beneath the anger, beneath the confusion, I understood something with sudden, terrible clarity. Sometimes guilt doesn't come from what we've done wrong. It comes from realizing how long we've waited to make something right. And that kind of guilt, the quiet, aching kind, was exactly what Marcus had carried in his eyes. The house was too quiet after they left. It wasn't the comforting kind of quiet, the kind that comes after prayer or music, but the sharp kind, like the air after lightning. The pie Grace had left sat untouched on the counter, still warm under its foil. The smell of cinnamon and butter filled the kitchen, pretending everything was fine. I sat down at the table and stared at the chair Marcus had just vacated. There was still a faint imprint on the cushion, a ghost of his presence, as if the room hadn't yet caught up to his leaving. My hands trembled when I reached for my cup of coffee, though the coffee had gone cold hours ago. I took a sip anyway. Bitterness helps when sweetness feels dishonest. I thought about his words. Parentage records. Markers don't align. Words that shouldn't belong in a family conversation. Words that belonged in courtrooms and laboratories, not kitchens and memories. I kept hearing his voice, low and careful. I don't want to believe it. But the doctor said my markers don't align with Dad's. I had brushed it off with anger, because anger is easier to carry than panic. But now, with the house empty, the anger started to collapse under its own weight. It was past midnight when I finally moved. The sky outside looked heavy, like it might rain again. I went to the drawer where I'd hidden the medical envelope, the one from Dr. Ramirez, the one with the test results and the blood type. I took it out, laid it flat on the table, and stared at the words "a positive." There was a strange, sharp clarity in that moment. Not shock, not even fear. Just understanding, slow and painful, like ice cracking across a lake. I whispered it aloud. It's not a mistake. And I knew it wasn't. Because deep down, I had known for years. The memory came back with frightening precision. Summer of 1984. Heat thick enough to make the air shimmer. Samuel was working night shifts at the plant, barely home. I was 6 months pregnant with Marcus, and feeling lonely in a way that makes even good women foolish. There had been someone, a co-worker, a friend of a friend, someone who'd come by to fix a leaky faucet when Samuel couldn't. He was kind, patient, asked about the baby, about my teaching job. He had eyes that lingered too long but never in a way that felt wrong. Just curious. Seen. It hadn't been love, not even close. It had been a moment. A single, trembling moment that I had buried so deep under guilt and silence that I'd convinced myself it never happened. But the truth doesn't die when you bury it. It grows roots. And now, after nearly 40 years, those roots had found daylight again. The next morning, the phone rang. It was Marcus. "Hey, Ma," he said, his voice hoarse like he hadn't slept. "Morning. I need to tell you something," he said. My grip on the receiver tightened. Go ahead. I didn't want to spring this on you yesterday, he said. But after I got that call about Dad's markers, I ordered a DNA test. You know, one of those kits. My heart sank. Marcus. I wasn't trying to accuse you of anything, he said quickly. I just wanted answers. I sent mine in. Grace did hers too. Just for fun, she said. The results came in last week. And he hesitated. It says I'm a partial match to you, obviously. But not to Dad's side. None of his cousins, none of his relatives showed up as close matches. Just someone else. Someone else. He swallowed audibly. A man named Thomas Avery. It said he's my biological match. Something like 48% shared DNA. That means he's either a close uncle or my father. The name hit me like a door slamming shut. Thomas Avery. Of course. I remembered him now. The man with the calm voice and gentle smile, the one who'd fixed the faucet, who'd stopped by the house once more a few weeks later with a box of old children's books for your classroom. He had a dimple in his left cheek and always smelled faintly of cedar and motor oil. I hadn't thought of him in decades. But apparently my blood had. Ma. Marcus said when I didn't answer. Do you know him? I took a deep breath. Yes, I said quietly. I knew him. How? He worked maintenance for the school district, I said slowly. A long time ago. He waited for me to continue. When I didn't, he said. So it's true? The words came out before I could stop them. Yes, Marcus. It's true. There was silence. The kind that stretches until you think it might tear the air apart. He didn't yell. He didn't curse. He just whispered. You could have told me. I know, I said. And I should have. But you were a baby. And then you were a boy. And then your father loved you so much that telling you would have felt like burning the only good thing left standing. He didn't respond right away. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded smaller. Did Dad know? I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Yes. A long pause. What did he do? He forgave me, I said. He told me it didn't matter, because when you were born, you looked up at him like he was the only man in the world. And that was enough for him. The line went quiet again. I could hear him breathing, steady, controlled. Finally, he said, I don't know what to do with this, Ma. Neither do I admitted. After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table again, staring at the sunlight crawling across the floor. It felt wrong that the day was so bright, that the sky dared to look clean while everything inside me was coming apart. I took the test results, the bracelet, the birth certificate, every paper that had built this lie, and spread them out like puzzle pieces. They made sense now. The mismatched blood types. The names. The silence I'd carried like armor. I realized that for decades, I had been living in two stories. One written by love, the other by omission. And now both had finally met on the same page. Angela came by that afternoon, unannounced as always. She took one look at my face and said, he knows. I didn't ask how she knew. Angela had always been tuned to the pitch of my silence. Was he angry? She asked. No, I said. Not yet. She sat down, folded her hands. You know this was bound to come out one way or another. I know, I said. But knowing doesn't make it hurt less. Angela nodded. Truth never does. But lies rot slower. That's their trick. I looked at her, and something broke. I thought I could bury it. I thought it died with Samuel. But now it's sitting at my table drinking coffee like it never left. She reached across the table and took my hand. Then make room for it, Clara. Set it a place. Because it's not leaving now. That night, I dreamed of Thomas Avery. Not the man himself, but of a sound. The steady drip of water from that leaky faucet he'd fixed. The echo of it in the quiet kitchen of my younger self. Drip. Pause. Drip. The rhythm of regret. I woke before dawn. Heart heavy but strangely steady. The first light was seeping through the blinds, soft and gray. I went downstairs, made coffee, and looked out the window at the world that was somehow still turning. On the counter, the pie sat untouched. I took off the foil, cut a small slice, and tasted it. It was too sweet. But it was real. The phone buzzed again mid-morning. A message from Marcus. I'll still drive you to the hospital Tuesday. We'll talk after that. I stared at the words, unsure whether they were an olive branch or a warning. Maybe both. Either way, he was still coming. And that meant the truth wasn't done with me yet. I placed the phone face down, picked up my coffee, and whispered to no one in particular, "All right then. Let's finish this." The morning of the biopsy came gray and still, as if the sky had run out of words. Marcus drove. Neither of us spoke much. The windshield wipers moved in their steady rhythm, clicking like an old metronome keeping time for a song we didn't want to hear. I watched the world slip by. Small houses, rain-darkened trees, people carrying umbrellas that bloomed open like slow flowers. I thought about all the mornings I had driven him to school, his head nodding in the passenger seat, eyes heavy with sleep. I used to hum hymns then, low and soft, to calm both of us. Now, the silence between us felt louder than any choir. When we reached the hospital, Marcus parked too carefully, aligning the car perfectly between the yellow lines. He'd inherited that from Samuel. The need to make things look right, even when nothing underneath was. Inside, the air smelled of antiseptic and coffee brewed too long ago. Evelyn met us at reception. Her face lit up when she saw me, but her eyes softened when they found Marcus. "You must be her son," she said and extended her hand. "Yes, ma'am," he replied. "Marcus. You've got your mother's voice," she said. "Warm and serious. Makes people listen whether they want to or not." He smiled politely. I could tell he didn't know what to do with that kind of kindness. Evelyn led me to the prep room, helped me into the paper gown, and attached a name band to my wrist. When she tightened the strap, her fingers lingered a second longer than necessary, a silent blessing. "You'll do just fine, Clara," she said. "I'm not afraid of pain," I told her. "Just the truth that follows it." She didn't argue. The procedure itself was quick. Pressure, a strange deep tug, then the metallic click of the sample tool. Dr. Ramirez spoke gently throughout, his voice steady, professional, a metronome against the noise inside my mind. When it was over, I sat for a few minutes while Evelyn bandaged my lower back and gave instructions I half heard. "Rest today, no heavy lifting, call if there's bleeding, results in 5 days." Marcus waited outside, hands folded, eyes down. He looked up when I came out, offering a faint smile. "You okay?" "I've been worse," I said. "And better. It's a long line between the two." He took my elbow gently as we walked to the car. "Want me to stop somewhere for lunch?" I shook my head. "Just home." The ride back was quieter than the one there. By the time we got home, the rain had stopped, but the clouds still hung low, heavy with what they hadn't said. I changed into my robe, made tea, and sat in the kitchen while Marcus busied himself at the counter, pretending he knew what to do with silence. After a while he spoke. "I've been thinking about Dad." I looked up. His tone was soft but sharp, like someone picking at an old scar. "I keep wondering what he knew," he said. "About Thomas Avery. About me." "He knew enough," I said quietly. Marcus turned toward me. "Did he ever talk about it? Did you too?" "He never brought it up again after the day I told him," I interrupted. "He just decided to love you harder." He nodded slowly, staring at the floor. "That sounds like him." It was. He exhaled. "Grace says there's always more to stories like this. That if one person has a secret, the other usually does too." I raised an eyebrow. "Grace is wiser than I gave her credit for." He hesitated, then reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded envelope. He placed it on the table between us. "I found this while cleaning out Dad's old desk last month. I wasn't looking for anything, but well, it was taped under the drawer. He must have hidden it there." My stomach tightened. "What is it?" "Letters," Marcus said. "2 of them. One addressed to you. One to someone named Rosa." The name hit me like a small, cold wave. "Rosa?" He nodded. I opened one. I looked at him sharply. "Marcus." "I know," he said, guilt rushing to his face. "I shouldn't have. But it's not what I expected." He slid the letter across the table. The paper was yellowed, folded neatly. Samuel's handwriting, strong, deliberate, unmistakable, covered the page. I opened it with trembling hands. "My dearest Rosa, If you're reading this, it means I never found the right way to make things right. I never told Clara about you, not fully. You deserved that honesty, but I was a coward. I told myself silence was mercy. I see now it was selfishness. Our daughter would be grown now. She should know she has a brother, Marcus, and that I thought of her every birthday, every Christmas, even when I pretended not to. You were never my mistake. You were my consequence and my grace. Samuel. My throat closed. The words blurred. Daughter. I looked up at Marcus. His face was pale, eyes wide. You knew about this? I read the first paragraph, he said softly. Then I stopped. I didn't want to know more until you did. I pressed a trembling hand to my forehead. He had another child? Looks like it, Marcus said. Grace helped me look her up. There's a record of a woman named Rosa Carter, and a daughter born in 1982. Same county, same time frame. 1982. 2 years before Marcus. 2 years before Thomas Avery. The irony wasn't lost on me. Samuel had been carrying a secret almost exactly like mine. Her name? I asked. Lena Carter. She's 40 now. Lives in Birmingham. The sound of her name filled the room. Strange and new and yet somehow familiar. He never said a word. I whispered. Marcus looked at me, his voice softening. Maybe he thought silence was mercy too. I laughed, but it wasn't kind. Mercy is overrated. He didn't disagree. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, wrapped in Samuel's old blanket, and reread the letter until the words began to hum. Our daughter would be grown now. I thought about that girl, about the woman she must have become. Did she know? Did she ever wonder why her father's name wasn't on the papers? Did she look like him? That same quiet strength, that slow, deliberate way of smiling only when it meant something? I closed my eyes and pictured her face. For the first time, I realized that Marcus might not be my only child, and that she might have walked through life wondering about the woman who had unknowingly taken her place. In the early hours, I went to Samuel's study, a small, dusty room lined with books and old blueprints. The air smelled faintly of cedar and ink. I pulled open the desk drawer, the one Marcus said he'd found the letters in. The tape residue was still there. I searched again, deeper this time, until my fingers brushed a second envelope wedged against the back. This one was addressed to me. I tore it open with shaking hands. Clara. I don't know how to say this without sounding like I'm confessing twice. You gave me a home after I had already ruined another. You gave me forgiveness when I deserved silence. I have a daughter, Clara. I met her mother before we married. A mistake born of my own pride. I tried to do right by her, but I didn't know how. When I met you, I promised myself I'd start clean. And I almost did. Until the guilt started talking louder than my prayers. You once told me that love doesn't erase sin. It just gives it somewhere to rest. You were right. I've carried this too long. I'm sorry. Samuel. I sat there, letters shaking in my hands, tears falling fast. The truth hit me in waves. He'd loved me, even while carrying this. He'd forgiven me before I ever asked. Maybe because he'd needed forgiveness too. We had built a life on secrets, but maybe somehow, those secrets had kept us together. By sunrise, I had made a decision. I went into the kitchen, brewed coffee, and picked up the phone. Marcus answered on the second ring, his voice groggy. Ma, I found another letter, I said. From your father. What did it say? That he had a daughter. Before me. Silence. Then a long sigh. So that's why he forgave you? Yes, I said. Because he needed forgiving too. He didn't speak for a moment. Then softly, what do we do now? I looked out the window. The morning light had turned the yard gold. We find her, I said. If she wants to be found. Are you sure? No, I said. But I've lived too long pretending not to be curious. Marcus laughed quietly, the first real laugh between us in months. That sounds like you. Maybe it's time you remembered what I sound like. When I hung up, I sat for a moment with both letters in my lap. One from the man I had betrayed, one from the man who had betrayed me. And somehow, instead of bitterness, all I felt was something close to peace. Because for the first time in my life, I realized that love isn't measured by perfection or purity. It's measured by who stays when the truth finally shows its face. And Samuel, flawed, faithful, human, had stayed. Now it was my turn. To stay. To face. To forgive. And to meet the daughter I never knew I had reason to search for. The rain left and the heat arrived in its place, thick as a sermon with no benediction. By noon the next day, the house felt swollen with it. Air that didn't move. Light that refused to soften. I tried to keep busy the way I always do when trouble pulls up a chair. Laundry in, laundry out. Wipe the counters that were already clean. Straighten the stack of envelopes. Touch Samuel's blanket. Put it back. The biopsy site ached in a small, insistent way. A door someone kept testing from the other side. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself so many nothings they made a crowd. I drank water. I forgot to eat. By mid-afternoon a film of salt had gathered on my skin. Every sound in the house grew a spine. The refrigerator's hum, the clock's dry click, the window's faint rattle. I tried to read a psalm and found that every line ended sooner than I remembered, as if God had stopped mid-sentence. The letters were on the table again. The one from Samuel to Rosa, the one to me. I told myself to put them away, but honesty is a tide. It comes back for what the shore tries to keep. I ran a finger over his handwriting, that deliberate steadiness. Our daughter would be grown now. The sentence behaved itself, and still my chest disobeyed. I reached for the kettle and misjudged the distance. My hand was there, the world wasn't. The kettle clanged, not a fall, just a protest. A small shiver ran through me, the kind the body sends up when it's run out of polite ways to ask for rest. Sit, I told myself, as if I were one of my own students jotting notes past the bell. I didn't sit. Instead I took the trash out because the bag had been waiting since morning, and I have never trusted grief not to rot. The afternoon sun hit the back steps, bright, unkind. I felt it on the crown of my head like a reproach. Halfway to the bin the ground tipped, subtle at first. Not the dramatic movie swoon, but a discreet betrayal, like a friend who leaves early without saying goodbye. The bag slipped. I grabbed for the railing and found air. The world narrowed to a strip of light, and the sound of my own breath breaking into pieces. I crouched because standing had turned into a theory, and theories don't hold weight. From the yard next door, Angela's wind chimes argued softly with a breeze I couldn't feel. Not now, I said, to my knees, to the mailbox, to the afternoon. My mouth had a metal taste, the kind that turns prayer into a chore. I don't know how long I knelt like that. Time is elastic when you're bargaining. The step pressed its wooden logic into my palms. The trash bag's handle, twisted tight around my fingers, bit in the way a cheap ring does. I let go and heard it slump against the grass, a small, humiliating surrender. A voice came then, the kind that comes from a person who knows better than doors. Clara? Angela, of course. There are people who arrive when you fall not because they were called, but because they live on the frequency of your life. I'm fine, I said. Which is what you say when you're trying not to cry on your back steps where God and everybody can see. You are not, she said, with the authority of a woman who has sat through more revivals than storms. The gate clicked. Shoes on grass. Then her hand, warm, dry, on my shoulder. You dizzy? You hurting? You want to faint? Do it on a rug. I am negotiating with the ground, I said. We disagree. Uh-huh. She crouched, eye level. Can I touch your face? The question broke something tender and right. Yes. Her cool palm met my cheek, thumb resting at the hinge of my jaw. You're hot. It's the weather. It's not the weather. We stayed there, two grown women breathing in time like a choir that remembers each other's lungs. She talked me to standing the way you talk a fool to first steps, slow, named, kind. Left hand on the rail. Good. Now we're going to shift. Good. Okay, preacher, we're up. Preacher? I said, swaying into her shoulder. You got that set to your mouth, she said. Like you're about to tell the room a truth, and they ain't gonna like it. Inside, she steered me to the couch and found the blanket without asking where I keep it. Samuel's wool, the color of weathered pews. She draped it over my legs and went to the kitchen the way the sure-footed do. Not careful, just certain. Cabinets opened. Water ran. A glass appeared in my hands. Drink. I did, and the world widened a sliver. She opened a window. Heat sighed out like a secret that had finally been told. What happened? She asked, sitting forward, elbows on her knees like the good kind of coach. Nothing, I said automatically. Then everything. Try that again but with nouns. I carried the trash. The ground disagreed. My body sent a memo. Accepted, she said. Now the part with the verbs. I am tired, I said, the word ordinary and catastrophic at once. The kind that sits behind your eyes and won't blink. Her face softened. There it is. I told her about the soft missteps, kettle, back steps, the way the psalm gave up early. I told her the ache where the doctor had taken what he needed from my bone. I told her about the letters, the daughter we didn't raise, the father he still was, the mother I am and the woman I had been one summer when loneliness made a fool of me. I told her about Marcus's voice on the phone, the way it carried a boy I'd known and a man I was meeting for the first time. Breathe, she said when my words outran their legs. I am, I said. But the air feels expensive. And yet, she said, pouring more water. We got credit. We sat with that. The house adjusted to our stillness, as if it understood we were not to be hurried. Out on the street, a delivery truck hissed to a stop, did its work, and left us to ours. Let me call Evelyn, Angela said finally. Tell her you almost toppled like a saint and an icon. No, I said. She'll fuss. And I am short on capacity for being loved out loud. Then I'll fuss quiet, she said, and didn't reach for her phone. Tears came then, not all at once but like a reluctant rain, large drops that chose their path. I had thought I'd run out. The body is a stingy accountant until it isn't. My face found her shoulder, and decided to rest there. She didn't pat, didn't shush, didn't offer a single brave word. She just stayed, wait, warmth, witness. When I was empty enough, embarrassment tried to climb in. Angela flicked it off my lap like lint. I better not see you apologizing, she said. This is not the day to lie on yourself. I thought I could carry it, I said, voice small. You could. You can't today. That's all we've learned. I let the sentence sit. It fit. Evening slid in, thin as thread through a needle. She moved to the kitchen and cooked eggs the way my mother did, slow, with Butter's patience. She set a plate in front of me and made me take 3 bites before she would tell me what else she'd brought. I got news, she said, casual as weather. But you ain't allowed to die before I say it. Deal, I said around a fork. I called a woman, she said. Named Lena Carter. The fork stopped midair. Angela. She'd posted a church live stream. I recognized the sanctuary. My cousin's friend knows the assistant pastor. You know how information travels when it's got an outfit to wear. I put the fork down. And she answered. I didn't say who I was. I asked if she had time to hear a story sometime in the nearish future. She said she was curious by nature and she'd make time. How did she sound? Taller than me, Angela said, which is her way of naming dignity. Careful. Kind. Fear and hope are cousins who arrive in the same car. I felt them both get out and walk up my front steps. I'm not ready, I said. You're not required to be, she said. She's not either. We're just moving the chairs around in the room where the conversation will happen. We ate in a piece so new it squeaked. The blanket's weight on my knees was exactly right. For the first time all day, my hands remembered not to shake. When Angela left, she flipped the porch light on. Not for her but for the version of me who would need it later. Call me if you stand up and the ground says no, she said. I owe that ground some words. Alone again, I washed the 1 plate and 1 glass because small completions matter. I put the letters back in their envelopes, but did not hide them this time. I tucked them under the bowl where we toss keys. A place for things that mean we come and go, but we come back. Night gathered, not menacing, just thorough. I went to bed before it finished, too tired to bargain with it. Sleep noticed and took pity. When it faltered at 2 a.m., a tremor of fear woke me. The kind that makes you take inventory in the dark. Hands, feet, name. I lay there counting the seconds between beats, found them reasonable, and fell back under. Morning always shows up as if it never doubted you. The light through my blinds arrived like a dressed usher, ready to seat me in whatever day this would be. I sat up slowly, Waited to see if the world would pitch. It didn't. A small victory noted, not framed. I made tea and carried it to the window that catches the first honest light. The azaleas wore last night's rain like jewelry. A neighbor boy on a too-small bike took the corner with the caution of someone who has learned the price of skin. Somewhere, a dog announced and then reconsidered an opinion. The collapse had come and gone. Not dramatic, not televised, but real enough to require both our names. It had taken exactly two things to survive it. A hand on my cheek and the decision to say out loud that I am tired. I stood there with the mug warming the ache in my hands, and understood something I must have taught 100 children, but never believed for myself. Breaking is not the opposite of being strong. It is how strong learns its shape. My phone chimed. A text from Marcus. Bringing dinner tonight. 7 okay? Then, as if he'd been braver for a second than he meant to be. I don't know how to hold all this. But I want to try. I typed. 7 is good. Trying is the work. I erased I love you and wrote it back and sent it before I could edit my heart again. Another text, this one from an unknown number. Ms. Jennings? This is Lena. Angela gave me your contact. No rus. Just hello. I read it twice because gentleness deserves to be read more than once. I answered, hello Lena. Thank you for reaching out. We can go as slow as you like. A bubble appeared, disappeared, then returned. Slow sounds right. I sing in the choir this morning. I'll send you the link. The alto section ain't ready for what I'm carrying, but the Lord's used to it. I laughed. One clean note that surprised the room. I know that choir, I wrote back. Sing something honest. The tea had cooled. I sipped it anyway. Outside, the day climbed up itself. Inside, I made a short list on the pad I keep by the bread box. Eat breakfast like it's a vote for staying. Take the envelope Tuesday. Let Marcus bring dinner in his unsure face. Let the ground win sometimes. Sit before it asks. Answer Lena when she's ready. Call Evelyn and tell her I'm not the weather. Then I added one more line, because the collapse had taught me where to store commandments. When you can't carry it, say so. Hand it to a name you trust. Watch it become lighter by the shape of their hands. I pinned the list to the fridge with the magnet in the shape of Alabama that Samuel bought at a rest stop because he liked how it turned the state into a small, held thing. The house listened, as houses do, and approved our plan with softly settling wood. Across the street, Angela stepped onto her porch in her Sunday dress, looked over, caught my eye, and lifted her chin the way saints do when they're tired and going anyway. I lifted mine back. No words. Not needed. Later, when the afternoon tried to blister again, I would lie down before the ground asked, and I would call it wisdom, not surrender. Later, when fear reached its careful hand toward the knob of my sternum, I would let it in long enough to say its piece, and then show it the couch where it could rest without running the house. For now, I ate toast. For now, I chose an easy psalm and read it to the end. For now, I said out loud to the empty room that isn't empty at all. I can't carry it alone. And the room, being a room that has known me for more than half my life, murmured back in its wood and wall voice. We know. We were never going to make you. The first thing I heard that morning was the creak of Angela's screen door. It has a particular sound. Not broken, not new, like an old friend clearing her throat before speaking. I was still in my robe, stirring oatmeal I didn't plan to eat, when she appeared on my porch holding a grocery bag, and that look that meant she'd already made decisions on my behalf. Don't start fussing, she said before I could even open the door. You looked half alive yesterday, so I brought what I call resurrection supplies. Angela, I'm fine, I said. Fine is a church word, she replied, brushing past me into the kitchen. You say it when you're about to lie to the congregation. I didn't argue. There's no sport in arguing with someone who's right before breakfast. She unpacked her bag like she was opening a sermon. Each thing placed with intention. A carton of eggs. Fresh ginger. Lemons. Collard greens. A jar of homemade soup, the label still damp from where she'd written, for Clara. Eat before thinking too much. You labeling food now? I asked. Helps me remember what it's for, she said. This one's for healing, not nostalgia. She filled the kettle and lit the burner with the ease of someone who'd done it here 100 times. And maybe she had, over the years of widowhood, church drives, And the long evenings when neither of us wanted to be alone but wouldn't admit it. You slept? She asked. Some dream. I think so, I said. But I can't remember what about. She hummed. That's good. Dreams can be greedy. Best to forget the ones that want too much. We sat at the kitchen table, the morning light trying to squeeze through clouds that weren't quite ready to leave. Angela buttered toast with the reverence of someone polishing silver. Marcus called me, she said, not looking up. I tensed. Oh, he wanted to know if you're all right. I'm breathing. See? Church word again. I sighed. He shouldn't worry. He's got his own family to look after. Angela finally looked at me, that steady, unblinking gaze that makes you feel both seen and scolded. You are his family, Clara. The part that's breaking doesn't make you less of it. I didn't answer. The kettle whistled, saving me from words I wasn't ready to find. She poured the water into 2 mugs, steeped the tea, and said, You've spent so many years being the strong one that you don't even recognize rest when it comes knocking. I'm not resting, I said. I'm thinking. Same difference when you do it right, she said. After breakfast, we walked out to the porch. The world was humid, green, loud with cicadas. Angela settled into the rocking chair Samuel built decades ago. She claimed it long ago as her second throne. I got something for you, she said, reaching into her bag again. She pulled out a folded piece of paper. Before you fuss, it's not a church flyer or a recipe. It's a name. I frowned. What name? Rosa's daughter, she said softly. Lena Carter. I felt my heart thump once, like a slow drum. Angela. Don't thank me. Don't curse me either, she said. I just thought you should know I found her number. I stared at the paper. My fingers twitched like they wanted to touch it but didn't trust themselves. She sings at a church up in Birmingham, Angela said. Runs a youth choir. Married once, divorced, no children. Kind woman, from what I could tell. Teaches music at the elementary school. She let that hang in the air. The idea of this unknown woman shaping children's voices while I sat here trying to steady my own. Music teacher, I murmured. Figures. Angela tilted her head. Why's that? Samuel couldn't carry a tune to save his life, I said. He used to hum like a broken refrigerator. Maybe she got it from me. I used to sing back in college. Before everything. Angela smiled. See? Already you're claiming her. I'm not, I said quickly. I'm just imagining. She rocked back and forth, the chair creaking. That's how claiming starts. We sat in quiet for a while. The breeze picked up, bringing the smell of cut grass and distant rain. I stared at the paper in my hand. The name seemed to shimmer. I don't know what to say to her, I said. Start with the truth, Angela said. Which part of it? The soft part, she said. Not the version you give the doctor or the pastor. The kind you say when you're ready to heal, not to defend. I sighed. You make it sound simple. It's not simple. It's just clear. Later that afternoon, Angela insisted on helping with laundry. She said folding clothes was good for the soul because nothing humbles pride like fitted sheets. While we worked, she talked, mostly about her late husband, her grandkids, her arthritis. But every so often, she'd slip in something small and sharp. You know, she said, forgiveness ain't a surrender. I looked up from the pile. Then what is it? It's strategy, she said. It's how you get your power back from what hurt you. I smiled faintly. That sounds like something you'd put on a church sign. I would, she said. But the pastor says we already used up our quote allowance for the year. I laughed, the kind that starts small and grows like a song you forgot you knew. She grinned. There she is. I was beginning to think the Lord misplaced your joy. It's not lost, I said. Just quieter. Then whisper it until it remembers the words, she said. As the sun dipped low, she made cornbread and tea, humming the whole time. The house smelled like peace disguised as dinner. We ate in the living room, the news mumbling low in the background. Afterward, she stood to leave but paused at the door. Clara, let me tell you something I learned after Robert passed, she said. There's a difference between being alone and being left. I frowned. What do you mean? Being left means someone walked away. Being alone means you stayed, she said. And staying takes more courage. Her words landed somewhere deep. You think I stayed too long? I think you stayed through storms that would have drowned most people, she said. Now it's time to let the flood dry up. After she left, I sat by the window, the paper still on the table beside me. Lena's name glowed faintly in the lamplight. I traced it with my fingertip the way one might trace the edges of a scar. Not to reopen it, but to understand how it healed. Outside, Angela's porch light blinked on. I could see her silhouette moving around her kitchen. The faint sound of gospel music floating across the yard. It struck me how that light had always been there, steady, ordinary, waiting. For years, I'd mistaken her presence for meddling. Now I saw it for what it was, mercy wearing an apron. I took a breath, picked up the phone and dialed the number. My hands trembled slightly as it rang once, twice, then stopped. A voicemail message played. Hi, this is Lena Carter. Leave a message, or if you're calling about the choir schedule, text me instead. Be blessed. Her voice was warm, bright, younger than I expected but with an undercurrent of something familiar. A steadiness I'd heard once before, long ago, in Samuel's laugh. The beep came. I didn't hang up. Hello, Lena, I said, my voice shaking but not breaking. My name is Clara Jennings. I think we might share a story neither of us asked for. I'm not calling for answers. I just wanted to say hello, and that I'm here whenever you're ready. I paused, letting the silence breathe. You don't owe me anything, I said softly, but you deserve to know you were never forgotten. Then I hung up. My hands were trembling, but not from fear this time, from release. Outside, the cicadas were louder now, singing like the world itself was exhaling. I looked toward Angela's house. Her light was still on. I smiled. Maybe forgiveness wasn't surrender. Maybe it was a hand extended through the dark, one neighbor reaching for another, steadying them both. And for the first time in a long while I felt steady too. The morning of my follow-up began like any other, though I knew it wasn't. There was a lightness in the air that didn't belong to weather. Even the sun seemed deliberate, soft but confident, spilling through the kitchen window as if it had been saving itself for this day. I took my time getting ready, pressed my blouse, chose the necklace Samuel gave me the Christmas before Marcus was born, a thin gold chain with a single pearl. He'd said it reminded him of calm water. That felt fitting. I wanted to walk into this day calm. Angela knocked at 8:30, punctual as sunrise. Your chauffeur's here, she said, holding her car keys like they were medals. I thought Marcus was driving me, I said. He is. But mothers get one driver, friends get another. I'm the warm-up act. I laughed softly. You mean you came to make sure I actually go? Exactly, she said and winked. You've got that maybe I'll cancel look in your eye. I recognize it. I invented it. Marcus arrived 5 minutes later, coffee in one hand and a paper bag in the other. I brought muffins, he said. Whole grain. Grace's idea. Ah, so she's the healthy one, Angela said, already reaching into the bag. She's the reasonable one, he said. I stood there for a moment, just watching them, my son and my oldest friend, talking easily, like the years of silence had been sanded down overnight. It struck me then. Healing doesn't always announce itself with fireworks. Sometimes it slips in quietly, sits at your kitchen table, and steals a muffin. The drive to the clinic was peaceful. Marcus played the old soul radio station, the kind that doesn't rush a song. Al Green was singing about love that endures, and for once, I didn't roll my eyes. At stoplights, Marcus drummed his fingers on the steering wheel, a nervous habit he used to have as a teenager. I remembered the times I'd scolded him for it, afraid he'd scratch the leather. Now I found the sound comforting. You okay? He asked, glancing at me. I'm fine, I said automatically. Then I caught myself and smiled. No, I'm good. Truly good. He smiled back, the corners of his eyes softening. You look it. I had good teachers, I said, nodding toward Angela. She's always been a professional meddler, Marcus said. Angela smirked. And yet look how fine you turned out. Marcus laughed, and the sound filled the car like sunlight. When we got to the clinic, Evelyn was waiting by the reception desk. Her smile was genuine this time, full unguarded. "There she is," she said. "The woman who scared me half to death last month." "I prefer to call it dramatic flair," I said. Evelyn laughed. "You're walking straighter today. That's a good sign." "Feels like it," I said. Dr. Ramirez came out a few minutes later. He looked tired, the kind of tired that comes from too many patients and too few miracles. But when his eyes found mine, his face softened. "Mrs. Jennings," he said, "come on back." Angela patted my arm. "We'll be right here," she said. Marcus nodded. "Don't let him talk medical without translating." "I've been doing this longer than you've been alive," I said. Inside the exam room, everything was the same pale green walls, the same faint hum of machines. But I wasn't. Dr. Ramirez reviewed the chart quietly, flipping pages with deliberate slowness. I could hear the faint scratch of his pen. The sound made me think of school days, of grading papers after midnight when the house was asleep. Finally, he looked up. "I have good news." I didn't breathe. "The biopsy results are benign," he said. "No sign of cancer. Just inflammation, likely autoimmune. Manageable. We'll start you on a low-dose treatment. Regular checkups. Nothing you can't handle." For a moment, I couldn't move. Couldn't even think. My whole body went still, like it was waiting for the echo to catch up. "Benign," I repeated. "You're sure?" He nodded. "Completely. You'll need to take care of yourself, though. Real rest. Less stress." I laughed, a soft, trembling laugh that felt foreign in my chest. "Doctor, I've been resting against my will for weeks." He smiled. "Then let's call it healing." When I walked back into the waiting area, Angela saw it immediately. The relief must have shown in my face before my mouth could form the words. "Well," she asked. "Benign," I said. He said it's manageable. Angela clapped once, loud enough to make the receptionist jump. "I told the Lord you still had chapters left." Marcus stood frozen for a beat, then exhaled so hard his shoulders dropped. "Thank God," he whispered. Then, softer still, "Thank you for telling me to come today." He hugged me. Really hugged me. Not the polite, careful kind, but the old kind. The one that says we lost time but found something better than it. On the way home, we stopped for lunch at a diner off Highway 12. A place I'd passed 100 times, but never entered. It smelled of bacon and nostalgia. Angela ordered pancakes because joy has calories. Marcus got black coffee and eggs. I ordered the catfish special because it felt like a celebration. Halfway through the meal, Marcus said quietly, "I called Lena." Angela froze mid-bite. My fork hovered above the plate. "You what?" "She texted me first," he said. "Said she got your voicemail. She wanted to make sure you were all right." My breath caught. "What did you tell her?" "The truth," he said. "That you're healing. That you're ready when she is." I nodded slowly. "And what did she say?" He smiled faintly. "She said, tell her I'll be in town next week. Maybe we can meet for coffee." I sat back. "Coffee?" I whispered. "Imagine that." Angela grinned. "See, the Lord still writes sequels." That night, back home, I stood on the porch watching the sunset bleed into the trees. Marcus had gone, promising to visit again next weekend. Angela had left after insisting I eat one more spoonful of soup, just in case heaven runs out. The house was quiet again, but it wasn't the lonely kind anymore. It was the kind of quiet that holds space, for peace, for memory, for whatever comes next. I thought of Samuel, of forgiveness, of all the words I'd spoken in the past weeks, and all the ones I hadn't needed to. It amazed me how truth, once spoken, stops shouting inside your chest. I whispered, "I did it, love." A breeze rustled through the garden, brushing against the wind chime he'd hung years ago. It made one soft sound almost like a reply. Later, I wrote in my notebook, the same one I use for grocery lists and doctor questions. The body heals slower than the heart admits. But when both decide to try, that's grace. I closed it and placed it beside the lamp. Then I sat down, looked around my little kitchen, and smiled at everything still standing. The walls, the light, the clock that had kept ticking even when I didn't. Tomorrow I would call Lena. Maybe we'd meet for coffee, maybe not. Either way, I would be ready. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was waiting for something terrible to happen. I was simply waiting to live. When I turned off the light, the house exhaled with me. And in that small, shared quiet, I realized something that would stay with me for the rest of my days. Healing isn't a miracle that arrives fully formed. It's a daily practice of forgiveness, toward others, toward life, toward the woman in the mirror. And that woman, after all this time, had finally learned to forgive herself. It was nearly autumn when I finally made it to the coast. The doctor had told me to walk more, gentle movement, he said, and Marcus had decided that meant a weekend trip to the sea. He booked a small cottage with white shutters and a porch that looked straight out toward the horizon. Angela, of course, declared she was coming too, because, as she put it, you don't put a woman fresh out of revelation near deep water without a witness. So here I was, 62 years old, wearing a sun hat too big for my head, standing on the edge of a shoreline that didn't know my name but seemed to recognize my heartbeat. The first thing I noticed was the sound, not just the crash of waves, but the rhythm beneath it, deep and steady, like the world exhaling after a long prayer. The air smelled of salt and pine and something clean, something that felt like permission. I hadn't seen the ocean in years, not since before Samuel died. Back then, the sea had made me uneasy, too wide, too restless, too honest. But that morning, as the light broke over the water, I understood why people called it healing. The sea doesn't lie. It doesn't promise calm. It just keeps coming back, no matter how many times it breaks. Maybe that's all survival is, learning to return. Angela sat on a folding chair near the dunes, her toes buried in the sand, reading some devotional book she'd probably already memorized. She waved without looking up. "Don't drown," she called. "Not planning on it," I said. "Good," she said. "We've had enough baptisms this year." I laughed and kicked off my sandals. The sand was cool at first, then warmer as I walked closer to the tide. My feet sank in, grains clinging to my skin like small reminders that even soft things can hold you. A gull cried overhead. Children chased the surf, their voices bright and unbroken. I thought of Marcus at that age, his legs too long for his body, his pockets full of seashells and questions. He'd always asked if the ocean had an ending. I used to tell him yes, somewhere far away. But now, watching the horizon, I realized I'd lied. Some things don't end. They just change direction. When Marcus arrived later that afternoon, he carried a picnic basket and a look I hadn't seen in him since childhood. Open, curious, almost unburdened. "You look good," he said as he set the basket down. "Sun suits you." "Maybe I was solar-powered all along," I said. He smiled, but his eyes were soft. "You look lighter." "I am," I said. "Not healed, but lighter." He nodded. "I think that's better." We sat on a blanket, eating sandwiches and peaches. The juice ran down our hands, sticky and sweet, and for once, I didn't rush to clean it off. Some messes are meant to be savored. After a while he said, "I met Lena." I froze. The wind paused too, as if waiting. "When?" "Last month," he said. "We've been talking a bit. Texts mostly. She's kind, ma. And funny. The sort of person who listens more than she speaks." I exhaled slowly. "Did she ask about me?" He nodded. "She did. I told her you'd call when you were ready. She said she's ready whenever you are." I looked out toward the waves. "Maybe soon." Marcus smiled. "No ruse." We ate in silence for a while. Then he said, "I keep thinking about Dad lately." I smiled faintly. "You too?" "Yeah," he said. "It's strange. I used to think about what he didn't tell me. Now I think about what he did. The way he loved you, the way he stayed. I guess I finally understand it." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "He'd be proud of you, you know." He looked at me, and for a moment, I saw the boy again. The one who used to race the waves and believe they were racing him back. "I hope so," he said quietly. That evening, after Angela went inside to rest her bones, and Marcus took a walk up the dunes, I sat alone on the porch, wrapped in a blanket. The horizon was painted in shades of gold and rose, the kind of colors you only see when day and night are learning how to forgive each other. I took out my journal, the same one I'd filled with doctor's notes, prayers, and the pieces of my confession. I opened to a blank page. For a moment, I just listened, to the wind. the waves, the steady hum of being alive. Then I wrote, "The ocean teaches you how to let go. Not by force, but by rhythm. You can't hold a tide. You can only stand in it long enough to understand what it takes with it, and what it gives back." I paused, the pen hovering, then added, "Samuel stayed, and that was love. Marcus forgave, and that was grace. Lena waits, and that is hope. As for me, I'm learning the difference between surviving and living. It turns out the distance between them is smaller than I thought." The next morning, I woke early. The sky was pale blue, the kind that feels like a clean sheet waiting to be written on. I slipped out quietly, not wanting to wake the others, and walked down to the water. The tide was gentle, the waves barely whispering. I walked until the hem of my dress was wet, until my feet disappeared beneath the foam. I closed my eyes and whispered a prayer. Not the kind I used to. Not desperate or demanding. Just a thank you. For the sea. For the morning. For the second chances that don't arrive like miracles but like mail. Quietly on time. Addressed to whoever's still standing there to receive them. When I opened my eyes, the sun was climbing over the horizon, warm and sure. The light spilled across the surface of the water, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't look away. I lifted my face to it and let it find me. Later that afternoon, I called Lena. The phone rang twice before she answered. "Hello." Her voice was soft, familiar in a way that startled me, not because I knew it, but because it felt like something that belonged. "Hi," I said. "It's Clara." There was a pause, a quiet, careful inhale. Then, "Hi, Ms. Jennings. I'm glad you called." "Just Clara," I said. "Please." She laughed, a gentle sound like wind through reeds. "All right. Just Clara." For a moment, neither of us spoke. I could hear the sea in the distance, steady as ever. "I hear you're by the water," she said. "I am," I said. "It's different now. Softer somehow." "I grew up near the coast," she said. "My mom used to say the waves sound different when you stop fighting them." I smiled. She was right. "I'd like to meet you," Lena said. "When you're ready." I nodded, though she couldn't see it. "I think I am." "Then maybe next weekend?" "Next weekend," I said. When the call ended, I stood there for a while, holding the phone in my hand, the sea wind curling around me like a shawl. Angela stepped out onto the porch. "You look like a woman who just did something brave," she said. "I did," I said. "And it didn't hurt." She smiled. "That's how you know it's time." That evening, as the sun dipped low again, I walked one last time along the beach. The tide was receding, leaving behind smooth stones and bits of shell. I picked one up, a small, pearly fragment, and held it in my palm. It was broken, but it caught the light perfectly. I slipped it into my pocket. Not as a keepsake of loss, but as proof that even fragments can shine. The waves whispered at my feet, soft and rhythmic, and I finally understood what they'd been trying to say all along. "You're still here. You're still moving. You've come back." And so I walked, not away from the past, not toward the future, but with them both, into the long gold of evening, where the sunlight at last had learned my name.